This is Project Grimfield, Episode 3, Project Grimfield, by David Hooker. This audiobook uses AI-generated narration. AI Finn is narrating this story. Chapter 5, Project Grimfield. David and Asia walked into the classroom. Mr. Grimfield glanced at Asia and nodded, but he completely ignored David walking next to her. They sat down side by side. David pulled his laptop out, his hands trembling slightly as the rest of the class murmured. "Okay, class, it's time to present your nature projects," Mr. Grimfield announced. "And let's start with yours, Holloway." David swallowed nervously. "Okay." He plugged his laptop into the projector. Grimfield moved to cut off the lights and flick the projector on. David clicked the file, and the video began to play. The camera panned across David's drawings, birds, lions, frogs, and other animals taped to his wall. He sneaked up on each drawing, pretending to record them in a safari. The class started snickering. "Look at him sneak up on a paper lion." A classmate laughed. Asia giggled softly, covering her mouth, finding the effort endearing. Mr. Grimfield sighed heavily, looking down at his desk instead of the video. After a moment, he stomped toward David and paused the video. "Do you think this is funny?" Grimfield asked in a deep, menacing voice. He slammed the top of David's laptop down. "No," David said, his voice quieter than before. "Speak up," Grimfield yelled, hitting the laptop with each word. "No." Mr. Grimfield snatched the laptop, towering over David. "This isn't a project." He threw it to the floor with a violent crash. David froze, tears brimming in his eyes. Mr. Grimfield stomped on the laptop. With each step, he yelled, "Get this garbage out of here." He kicked the remains of the laptop toward David's feet, sparks of plastic scattering across the floor. Asia stood abruptly. "That's not fair, Mr. Grimfield. You can't just break someone's stuff." "Sit down this second, Miss Davis," Grimfield barked. Asia threw her pencil in frustration. Several other students started tossing their belongings, sensing the injustice. "Enough." The room fell silent. Grimfield pointed at Asia. "Miss Davis, you may go to the principal's office. I'll make sure to inform them that you're expelled." He turned to the rest of the class, his voice dripping with wrath. "As for the rest of you, because of this mess David has caused, you all fail. Not only that, you will stay here until you write the alphabet 10 times. And once you're done, I want each of you to do 100 jumping jacks while saying, 'I'm sorry, Grimfield.'" He glared at David, who was still on the floor, trembling. "And you, Holloway, get off the floor and stop crying over your failure. Everyone had to fail, and now so will you." David wiped his tears, feeling a mix of humiliation, anger, and disbelief. Asia sat back down, fuming silently, while the rest of the class nervously started their punishment. After Asia exited the classroom in tears, the rest of the day dragged on. By the time the clock struck 12, the students shuffled out of the classroom. The hallways were silent, except for the occasional whisper. Many students glanced at David, some with judgmental stares, others with barely concealed annoyance. At lunch, David sat alone, poking at his food. A kid from class approached, leaning against the table. "Hey, I was wondering, why do you always mess up stuff?" "Grimfield messed up," David said, gritting his teeth. "No, you messed up because you can't just do what he asks," the kid replied. "My friend's getting really tired of you too. Just saying, if you keep doing this, we might handle you." The kid walked away, leaving David simmering with anger, but too humiliated to say anything. The bell rang, releasing the students. David walked toward the car, noticing Mr. Grimfield standing outside, speaking to both of his parents. Andrew's face was tense, his jaw clenched. Samantha rubbed her forehead, looking exhausted. "Dad, don't believe him." David started, running up. "Shut up, son," Andrew said sharply. "Get in the car." Samantha just shook her head quietly, muttering under her breath. "I thought he changed." David climbed into the back seat, his heart pounding. Through the car window, he could hear Grimfield's voice faintly. "He broke his laptop, throwing a tantrum, just because I failed him for doing it wrong," Grimfield said. "Has he ever acted like this before? I recall him ripping up his periodic table." "Yes, he came home angry about something once," Andrew said. "I heard him in his room, throwing stuff. I told him to do his work, but I guess that wasn't good enough." "Well, it seems David lied to you both, to make you think he was doing well, when really he wasn't," Grimfield added. "Don't worry, Mr. Grimfield," Andrew snarled. "I'll straighten him out." They got in the car. David started to speak. "He broke my laptop. David, when you get home, wait for me in your room." David's chest tightened, tears spilling down his face. "Don't cry now, save it for later," Andrew said. "David, why would you do that?"
Samantha asked. "Do you know how much a laptop costs? Why can't you just do your work?" She sighed, rubbing her forehead, conflicted and tired. I don't know what to do." "I do," Andrew said. He pressed the accelerator, driving faster, rushing home. David sat in the back seat, his chest heaving as he fought back sobs, feeling trapped between the weight of his parents' disappointment and Mr. Grimfield's cruelty. The car pulled into the driveway, the engine cutting out with a heavy metallic click. As the headlights flickered off, the yard was instantly plunged into deep, suffocating shadows. Inside the house, the silence was absolute. David walked through the front door, alongside his father, Andrew, and his mother, Samantha. No one spoke. The air was thick with a tension that hadn't yet found its breaking point. David immediately broke away from them, heading straight for his room. He entered, shut the door, and collapsed to his knees at the edge of his bed. His hands clapped together so tightly, his knuckles turned white against the comforter. His chest heaved with a frantic, shallow rhythm. "Please, God, I'm sorry," his voice breaking. "Whatever I did to deserve this, any judgment, I'm sorry." Tears began to stream down his face, falling onto the mattress. He leaned his forehead against his gripped hands, his body trembling. "There's nothing left to take," he choked out. "I have nothing left to give." Suddenly, the door banged open. Andrew stood in the frame, a silhouette of looming aggression against the hallway light. David spun around on his knees, his hands flying up as if to shield himself from a blow. "Dad, please. It's not my fault," David cried. "Why do you hate me so much?" Andrew didn't answer. He lunged forward, his large hand grabbing the hood of David's sweatshirt. No, please." With a violent jerk, Andrew yanked the hoodie over David's head, stripping it off him in one rough motion. In the hallway, Samantha stood watching. For a brief second, a flicker of pity crossed her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, hardened resolve. She reached out, grabbed the handle to David's door, and pulled it shut. Through the narrowing gap, David caught her eye. "Mom, please talk to him. Please." The door clicked shut. Samantha turned away and walked to the sofa. She sat down, picked up the remote, and turned up the volume on the TV. A bright, loud game show filled the living room, the artificial cheers and bells drowning out the muffled sounds coming from behind the bedroom door. Back in the room, Andrew was unbuckling his leather belt. The metal buckle clinked, a sharp, clinical sound. "Are you going to learn?" Andrew asked. He swung. The leather cracked against David's back. "Yes," David screamed. "Crack. You supposed to. Stop being disrespectful." Andrew grunted with every strike. David squirmed on the floor, trying to crawl away, his hands shaking violently. Red welts began to bloom across his back and legs. Andrew eventually stopped, breathing hard, his eyes scanning the room. They landed on the walls, which were covered in David's sketches. He began tearing them down in fistfuls, the paper ripping loudly in the small space. "You know what? This is going in the trash," Andrew muttered. His eyes then landed on a camcorder sitting on the desk. He picked it up, his gaze narrowing. "What's this? Where did you get this from?" "Dad, please." David gasped for air, his voice weak. "It's from Asia." "Oh, so you care about taking care of her stuff but not ours." Andrew raised the camera and slammed it onto the hardwood floor. Plastic shattered, pieces skittering across the room. David gasps, clutching his chest as if his heart were physically breaking. He lowered his head until it touched the floor, utterly defeated. "Now you see how it feels," Andrew said. "And guess what? You aren't talking to her anymore. You can't even focus as it is." Andrew walked toward the door, stepping over the wreckage of the drawings. "Clean all this up. You're done playing with anything, period. You do your schoolwork, until I say otherwise." Andrew exited and slammed the door. David remained on the floor. The crying had stopped. His eyes were open, staring at the broken camera, but they were hollow. He was motionless, exhausted, dead inside. He lies there as the ceiling fan hummed faintly above him, staring at nothing. His body felt hollow, like it had already shut down. "You win," he thought. The voice in his head quiet and defeated. "Whatever life wants from me, I'll just endure it until I can't." His eyes drifted to the wall where his drawings used to be. "Why do I even bother trying? The more I try, the more I destroy. The more I try, the more it becomes my fault. The room feels smaller. The harder I try to explain myself, the crazier I look. And the crazier I look, the crazier I become. And the more blameless everyone else is." There was a long pause in the silence of the room. His fingers curled slightly against the carpet, then relaxed. Are they wrong? Or am I wrong? His eyes slowly closed. Not to sleep, but just to escape being seen. Chapter 6. Lifeless. Years later, the air mattress beneath David had finally given up, sagging into a deflated heap against the floor. Now 24, he lay flat on the hard surface, one arm draped heavily over his chest. The room around him had surrendered to neglect, Piles of laundry competed for space with greasy fast food wrappers, and a faint, persistent smell of mildew clung to the stagnant air. David exhaled, a long and tired sound that seemed to carry the weight of the room. With stiff joints he pushed himself up from the floor and stood. Moving into the living room, the small, low-income house felt even more worn down. This was the poor side of Flailington, where the paint chipped in large flakes, and the overhead lights flickered with a rhythmic dying pulse. In the corner, a desktop computer hums loudly, its internal fans struggling while the internet connection crawls at a snail's pace. David sat, his fingers typing and clicking through job listings. His eyes skimmed the titles, searching for a gap he could fit into. Requires experience. Diploma required. Full-time only. He hit refresh. He waited. There was nothing. Bored and defeated, David leaned back in his chair and let out a heavy sigh. He stood, reached down and shut the computer off, the hum cutting out into an abrupt silence. Moments later, he was in the kitchen. He sat at the small round table, facing a framed photo of Andrew and Samantha. They remained frozen in time, posed, smiling, unaware of the years that had passed. David set a single cookie on a small plate. Carefully he placed a lone candle in the center and struck a match. The flame wobbled, casting a thin, shaky light across the table. He sat down and began to sing. His voice was flat and raspy, a monotone drone that barely filled the room. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. He didn't look away from the photo. Happy birthday, dear David. Happy birthday to me. A moment of silence followed. The flame flickered again, dancing in a draft David couldn't feel. Make a wish, David, he said, his voice forced into a hollow make-believe cheer. He opened his mouth to speak, but then he stopped. His eyes drifted away from the candle, his gaze softening as he zoned out. The thought he was reaching for, never fully formed, it remained just out of reach in the gray static of his mind. Finally he exhaled, and blew the candle out. A thin trail of smoke curled upward toward the ceiling before dissolving into the air. David just sat there, empty. No wish had been made, and he had no expectation that one would have mattered anyway. The city bus hissed as it pulled away, leaving a plume of exhaust that lingered in the midday heat. David stood alone on the curb, his hands buried deep in his jacket pockets, watching the vehicle grow smaller until it vanished down the street. With a heavy, reluctant breath, he turned toward a low beige building that sat squat against the skyline. He stopped at the entrance of the mental health clinic. For a long moment, he simply stared at the door, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. He exhaled sharply through his nose, centered himself, and stepped inside. David, good to see you, Professor Walter said, standing as David entered the office. Walter was in his late 50s, a man who carried calm energy and spoke with an understanding way. They shook hands. David's grip was weak but polite, before settling into the chairs across from one another. So, Walter began, unhurried. How have you been feeling? David scoffed, his gaze drifting toward the window. Feeling? He shook his head slowly. I don't even recognize that word anymore. He settled back into his chair, his voice dropping to a low murmur. I guess you could say I've been getting by. Walter nodded, letting the silence sit between them like a third guest. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a prescription bottle, placing it carefully on the desk between them. I can't take these, David said. Walter leaned forward slightly, his brow furrowed. But you need them, David. I know. I understand why you gave them to me, David replied, nodding once in frustration. He looked down at the plastic bottle. But they're making things worse. I'm already on medication for my nightmares.
These just make them stronger. How so? Some antidepressants mess with REM sleep, David explained, choosing his words with clinical precision. They make dreams more intense. He rubbed his hands together nervously. For someone like me, that means worse nightmares. Sometimes people even act them out in their sleep. David's jaw tightened. I'm barely resting as it is. And if you miss a dose or stop suddenly, it can make the dreams even more brutal. He gave a tired half shrug. It's like fixing one problem by feeding another. Walter listened intently, allowing the explanation to finish before exhaling quietly. He attempted to ease the tension with a light tone.
Wow. You must have some background in the medical field.
Not really, David said, a dry, almost amused half-smile flickering across his lips. I just use the internet to keep myself awake. I'm kind of addicted to researching what's wrong with me. Walter reached out and gently slid the pill bottle toward his side of the desk. All right, let's pause these for now. I'll look into other options. Something that won't aggravate your sleep. We'll figure it out together. David nodded, a flicker of relief mixing with his natural caution. David, Walter said carefully, his voice steady. Has there ever been a time in your life where you felt accepted? David stiffened. His shoulders rose, as if bracing for a blow. When I was 13, he said after a long silence. He stared at the floor, his voice hollow. Some kids told me they'd be my friends if I acted like a dog. Walter's expression darkened. Did tricks. Crawled around. Barked, David continued, swallowing hard. They laughed. Said they'd hang out with me after that. He clenched his jaw, the memory bitter as gall. Then they avoided me every day like I didn't exist. I guess that's when I learned how much approval mattered, and how cheap it could be. Walter leaned forward, his voice earnest. I'm truly sorry that happened to you, David. You didn't deserve that. And for what it's worth, you matter to me. David's eyes went briefly glassy. He nodded. Thanks, Mr. Walter. It wasn't your lack of care that hurt me. I do appreciate the reassurance. Standing up, David smoothed his jacket. I should get going. Of course, Walter said, smiling warmly. Be safe, David. This concludes Project Grimfield. Episode 3, Project Grimfield, by David Hooker. This audiobook uses AI-generated narration. AI Finn is narrating this story.